In Japan, where kaiju attacks are more common than a Monday morning, the Japan Defense Force is on the front lines battling these monstrous threats. Kafka Hibino, a kaiju corpse cleanup guy, has always dreamed of joining the Defense Force to fight these beasts himself. But when he finally gets the chance to live his dream, things take a wild turn. Kafka undergoes a shocking transformation and becomes a kaiju himself. Now, instead of fighting monsters, he's one of them. How will Kafka handle this insane twist and still protect humanity from the kaiju menace? In a world where kaiju roam and cause chaos like they're trying to win a Most Destructive Monster award, Division 3 is the go-to crew for taking them down. They're like the superheroes of the bunch, swooping in with their flashy tech and zeroing in on the big baddies. But let's be real, Kafka and his squad of cleanup crew are the true MVPs. They're the ones dealing with the gross aftermath. Imagine cleaning up after a giant monster's vomit. Not exactly the glamorous life Kafka dreamed of when he imagined himself as a top-tier Defense Force hero. Kafka's daily grind involves scraping kaiju guts off the city streets and cursing under his breath about how his heroic aspirations have turned into a never-ending job of mop and bucket. His routine is interrupted when Ichikawa, a new part-timer with stars in his eyes and a heart full of dreams, shows up. Ichikawa's got the enthusiasm of a kid who just found out about candy, and he's gung-ho about joining the Defense Force. Kafka can't help but cringe at his own younger self reflected in Ichikawa's bright-eyed optimism. It's like looking at a mirror that's showing you at your most cringeworthy. Kafka tries to drop some wisdom bombs about the grim realities of kaiju remains. Think hazardous materials, gross stuff, and generally being in the path of disaster. Ichikawa, however, is so fired up that he might as well have a sign saying, "I'm determined," plastered on his back. Kafka's self-doubt levels shoot through the roof, wondering if he's just become a cautionary tale for eager newbies. Then, just when Kafka thinks things couldn't get worse, a kaiju attacks out of nowhere. It's like the universe said, you know what, let's make Kafka stay even shittier. They scramble to escape, but Kafka ends up getting torn up pretty bad and winds up as Kaiju Chow. It's the ultimate crap hit the fan moment. But wait, Kafka doesn't just die, he gets a surprise comeback like a monster movie twist. He somehow claws his way out of the kaiju's belly like a scene from a gore fest, regenerates like he's some kind of super reptile, and then, fueled by sheer rage and a burning desire to prove his worth, he starts tearing the kaiju apart with his bare hands. Talk about going from zero to hero in no time. Ichikawa watches in sheer disbelief as Kafka transforms into a kaiju-slaying beast. It's like watching your favorite underdog turn into a legend. Kafka, now fully back in action and not just a pile of monster mush, collapses from sheer exhaustion after the fight. The Division 3 crew rolls up to clean the mess, leaving Kafka wondering how he's still alive and what the hell just happened. When Kafka wakes up in the hospital, he's greeted by Ichikawa, who's practically bouncing with excitement and gives Kafka props for taking down his first kaiju. Kafka, meanwhile, is left staring at the ceiling, pondering if maybe his long-forgotten dream of heroism might not be completely out of reach after all. After this wild ride, Kafka realizes that life's got a way of kicking your ass, but also giving you a chance to fight back. And maybe, just maybe, live out those dreams you thought were long gone. Kafka, now transformed into a kaiju, accidentally causes trouble at a hospital. The Defense Force is on high alert, and Kafka, along with his friend Ichikawa, tries to manage Kafka's monstrous form and its problems. Despite Kafka's good intentions, his appearance creates fear and misunderstanding, making his dream of joining the Defense Force seem out of reach. In the hospital, Kafka's presence caused panic. After more accidental damage while trying to leave, Kafka and Ichikawa escape. Kafka struggles with his new overwhelming strength and even has trouble dealing with basic needs like needing to pee. The Defense Force splits its focus between Kafka and a new kaiju threat. Kafka heroically saves a young girl and her injured mother from a kaiju attack, which earns him the girl's gratitude despite his scary appearance. As Kafka and Ichikawa leave, the Defense Force remains unaware of Kafka's involvement. Mina, the Defense Force leader, is surprised to find out that a good kaiju might exist based on the girl's story. 3 months later, Kafka's story makes the news as Kaiju number 8, and the Defense Force steps up its search. Kafka's attempts to return to human society are complicated by his kaiju form, which he struggles to hide. Although he passes the first round of the Defense Force exams, he worries about the final stage and fears being rejected. Ichikawa brings Kafka his exam results, and Kafka is happy to learn he passed the first round. However, he remains anxious about the final stage. Ichikawa encourages him to stay hopeful, and Kafka reflects on his long-held dream of joining the Defense Force. Determined, Kafka decides to not give up despite the challenges he faces. Kafka's big shot at joining the defense force feels like a horror movie with no happy ending. First up is the fitness test, which is more of a let's see how many ways you can embarrass yourself kind of ordeal. Kafka, a guy whose idea of exercise is lifting kaiju guts, flunks spectacularly. His performance is so pitiful he might as well have been running through quicksand. And then there's Kikoru, the queen bee of the candidates, who's not shy about rubbing it in. Her taunts sting more than 100 bee stings. Next, Kafka's thrown into the aptitude test, which is like being tossed into the lion's den, but with kaiju instead of lions. These creatures are pure nightmare fuel, and Kafka's initial response is the kind of frozen panic that makes you wish for a hole to crawl into. His special suit, crafted from kaiju material and meant to turn him into a combat beast, turns out to be a total dud. It's so ineffective, it might as well be made of wet cardboard. His combat power is clocked at a pathetic 0, making him the laughingstock of the test. Meanwhile, Kikoru's flaunting her top-tier combat power like she's auditioning for a superhero movie. Kafka's attempts to move in his suit look like a bad dance routine, and it's not pretty. Desperate times call for desperate measures, so Kafka channels his inner strategist. He tells Ichikawa that the test might be more about brains than brawn and that teamwork is the real game changer. Kafka manages to scrape together a 12% combat power output, which feels like a miracle given his starting point. Despite the rough start and constant kicks in the teeth, Kafka's strategic moves start to pay off. He proves he's not just a walking disaster, but someone who can actually contribute. Kafka's underground story shines through as he transforms from the test's biggest joke to a key player, showing that even when you're down in the dumps, you can still claw your way up. During the Hunter's exam, Kafka, despite having a broken leg, insists on continuing. Ichikawa, determined to finish together, carries Kafka on his shoulders while Kafka offers strategic advice. Their unconventional partnership amuses the exam officials, especially Hoshina, who is fascinated by their tenacity. Kikoru, a standout contestant, dominates the field by quickly defeating the kaiju, impressing everyone with her skills. However, her success is short-lived as a new threat appears. A humanoid kaiju attacks Kikoru, impaling her and reviving the giant kaiju. Despite her severe injuries, Kikoru refuses to retreat, driven by her father's high expectations and her own determination to protect others. Seeing Kikoru struggle, Kafka decides to help. Ignoring concerns about his transformation, Kafka heads to the battlefield. Kikoru is surprised to see Kafka transform into a kaiju and come to her aid. Kafka fights the giant kaiju, using his kaiju form to shield Kikoru from a powerful blast and ultimately defeat the monster. The exam's control room, monitoring the situation, is alarmed by the appearance of a new, highly resilient kaiju. With the cameras malfunctioning, they are unable to see the full extent of Kafka's actions. Despite this, Kafka's overwhelming power becomes evident as he decisively defeats the giant kaiju with a single, forceful blow. Kikoru, still recovering, is amazed by Kafka's abilities and his unexpected act of heroism. Kafka, urging Kikoru to rest and promising to explain later, leaves her with a message about standing her ground despite the world's opposition. Kafka and Ichikawa, eager to avoid further scrutiny, quickly exit the testing grounds. In the aftermath, Kikoru is rescued and the immediate threat is neutralized. Kafka's secret identity remains concealed, and the exam concludes with Kikoru reflecting on Kafka's advice and her own potential as a soldier. The experience leaves her contemplating her future and the true meaning of being a formidable force. Kafka is on edge, stressing about his exam results and blaming Ichikawa for convincing him to reapply. When the results come in, Kafka's jaw nearly hits the floor when he finds out he passed. But the relief is short-lived as he can't stop worrying about his future with Mina. At the entrance ceremony, Izumo strutts around congratulating Kaguragi, who's bragging about her top score like she just won the Olympics. Kafka's nowhere to be seen, and the ceremony rolls on with Kikoru holding the mic for the new recruits. Mina, the captain, gives a rousing speech about the dangerous missions ahead and thanks Kikoru for her support. Despite Kafka's less-than-stellar exam scores and his suit's epic fail, Mina decides to keep him on the team, impressed by his practical test performance. Kafka, however, isn't exactly in the mood for the celebration. He gets hit with 100 push-ups for talking out of turn. Kikoru later gives Kafka a stern warning to keep his kaiju secret under wraps. If Kafka screws up, he's in for a world of hurt. Kafka vents to Kikoru and Ichikawa, who fill him in on the risks of his secret getting out. Kikoru warns that Kafka could end up in some twisted experiments or be used as a weapon if his secret leaks. Kafka pleads for her to keep his secret safe and swears he won't be a liability. Training is a whole other beast. Ichikawa's killing it with the anti-kaiju guns, making everyone else look like slackers. Kafka's performance initially overshadows Ichikawa's record, but Kikuru swoops in with skills that leave everyone in the dust. Kafka struggling with his suit and feeling like a punching bag as his teammates breeze through. Hoshina, who finds Kafka's struggles a bit of a joke, warns him that he could be out of the door in 3 months if he doesn't get his act together. The recruits get hit with 15 laps as punishment, adding to the grueling training regimen. Kafka's grit is unwavering. He's determined to juggle his kaiju and human sides, pushing himself to the limit to prove he belongs. He's hell-bent on standing by Mina and defending humanity no matter how tough things get. Mina arrives at the meeting room in her battle gear and is updated by Okunogi about the situation. The area around the kaiju attack has been cleared of civilians, but the locals seem unusually calm despite the danger. The main problem is a giant kaiju that's about to start breeding, which means it could produce many smaller kaiju if not dealt with quickly. Mina plans to take out the giant kaiju before it spawns more, while her team will set up snipers to deal with the smaller ones. As they get ready, Hoshina questions if the new recruits, including Kafka, are ready for the mission. Kafka is nervous but determined to prove himself. The team arrives at their post where Kafka and the others see the giant kaiju they need to defeat. Hoshina explains the plan. Mina will handle the giant kaiju, and the newbies will tackle the newly spawned smaller kaiju. During the battle, Kafka struggles but contributes by investigating kaiju corpses. He finds crucial information about the kaiju's reproductive organs and cores, aiding the defense force. Meanwhile, Mina's team fights the giant kaiju, with Mina using impressive shooting skills to ensure its death. Her use of extra ammunition is criticized for being costly, despite the kaiju being destroyed. Hoshina shows off his combat skills and shares his family's kaiju hunting legacy. After Mina defeats the giant kaiju, it releases thousands of spores, leading to a new swarm of smaller kaiju that the defense force must handle. The new recruits, though exhausted and criticized by veterans, persist in fighting. Nakanoshima offers them a break, but they choose to continue. He's concerned for their health, believing completing this challenging mission will boost their skills. After all the kaiju are defeated, the team discovers a person standing over a kaiju corpse. The person reveals that the reproductive organs were planted inside the kaiju, indicating a larger threat that they haven't fully grasped yet. Renu yells Iharu to move, but he gets blasted through the chest and starts bleeding out. Even with their suit trying to stabilize him, they realize their attacker is Kaiju number 9, the same monster who wrecked Kikuru during their exam. Number 9, pissed about his failed implants, creates a zone to block signals and stop anyone calling for help. Ichikawa, struggling at first, finally starts to read Number 9's moves, giving Iharu a chance to bail. Bleeding and barely hanging on, Ichika tells Iharu to get out of there, knowing things are dire. Iharu, feeling like his training's been a bust, reluctantly retreats. Ichika, hell-bent on defending his friends, keeps fighting fiercely. Number 9 mocks Ichika and dodges his attacks, but Iharu, finally shaking off his self-doubt, comes back to help. Number 9's barrier makes it impossible to escape, so Iharu's return is a game changer. The team decides to team up against Number 9. Iharu covers fire while Reno charges in, but Number 9 just puts up a wall of corpses for defense. Kafka shows up, takes off Number 9's head, and apologizes for being late. Even with Kafka's power, Number 9 regenerates and gears up for round 2. Kafka's fierce counterattacks to force Number 9 to back off, but he swears he'll be back. Kafka, now face-to-face with Vice Captain Hoshina, realizes he's about to face another major challenge. Kafka is reluctant to fight Vice Captain Hoshina, but Hoshina's swift attack forces him into serious combat. Hoshina, faster and relentless, lands precise strikes exposing Kafka's core. Kafka regenerates but realizes he can't take any more injuries. Hoshina charges up his blades, unleashing a powerful energy wave that costs Kafka a leg. Kafka counters with a mega punch using a blast to escape into the night, leaving Hoshina frustrated and disappointed. Hoshina reports to Mina, while Kikuru, conflicted about Kafka, supports him as he apologizes for his recklessness. She reassures Kafka about Ichikawa and Iharu's safety and warns him of potential issues due to his exposure. Hoshina and Mina discover Kaiju number 8 had a human form and caused less random destruction than typical Kaiju. Mina takes over the Kaiju situation, and Ichikawa, recovering at the hospital, thanks Kafka and Kikuru, who reassures him. Kafka learns about Izumi's role in the anti-Kaiju tech. At a celebration, Hoshina promotes Kafka to a full defense force member, though Kafka faces a 50 push-up penalty for speaking out of turn. Kafka vows to meet Hoshina's expectations as a new humanoid Kaiju and his fleet prepare for an impending attack. As Hoshina wraps up his duties, he recalls the unsettling fight with Kaiju number 8, feeling as though he fought a human. Noting Kaiju number 9's advanced abilities, he realizes the threats have evolved. Kafka, distracted by strange lights, sees them lead to a devastating attack on the base. Hoshina activates emergency protocols and learns that wyvern-type kaiju, typically solitary, are attacking together under a strong leader, a red kaiju with a fortitude of 8.3. Hoshina directs platoon leaders to handle the other kaiju while he confronts the red kaiju leader. The base officers struggle against the kaiju and are forced to retreat. Kafka advises targeting the kaiju's weak spots instead of attacking head-on. Following this, Kaguragi and Izumo attempt to implement a new strategy but are interrupted by another kaiju. Kikoru, equipped with a powerful battle axe, proves its effectiveness against the kaiju while Iaru supports her with freezing rounds. Hoshina, facing the red kaiju, manages to sever its arm but continues to struggle. Kafka partially transforms to help save an officer from a wyvern blast, impressing Mina. As Hoshina battles the increasingly formidable red kaiju, Kafka rushes to his aid, determined to exploit the kaiju's core vulnerability despite exhaustion. Hoshina, barely hanging on, goes all in with one last desperate leap to hit Red, only to get smashed back across the city like a ragdoll. Flashbacks hit him hard, showing his dad was never impressed with his sword skills. Even though he's on the edge of collapse, Hoshina's hell-bent on fighting, ready to risk it all. Red, totally expecting this, sends an exploding wyvern straight at him. Hoshina flashes back to Mina's past help and his own role in saving her. As Red grabs Hoshina, Kafka dives in, transforming to save him. Mina, on a rooftop, blasts off Red's arm with a railgun and nails him with another shot. Struggling with a weak suit, Hoshina goes after Red's legs, but Red's insane healing makes it pointless. Kikoru arrives with her axe but can barely scratch Red's shell. Hoshina tells Kikoru to hit where he slashed, and together they finally manage to slow Red down, if only for a bit. After the battle, Kikoru collapses, wiped out, and Hoshina realizes they've bought enough time for Mina. With one bullet left, Mina, covered by defense force fire, takes the perfect shot to blow Red's core and seal the win. Kafka, pumped by the epic teamwork, vows to train harder. Afterward, Ichika jokes about Kafka's appearance but gives him a pep talk. Mina and Hoshina handle the last wyverns despite being wiped out, while squad commanders clean up. A massive wyvern bomb appears, and Kafka reveals his Kaiju number 8 identity to send it into orbit, saving the day but exposing a secret. Mina gets ready to take him in. Kafka is captured and a board meeting debates his fate. The deputy director freaks out about the media fallout and theft, with some suggesting Kafka should be killed or used as a weapon. The director general decides to meet Kafka, who feels he'd betrayed his team. Mina reassures him and vows to prove he's still human. Kafka is locked up in a secure facility and his 3rd Division buddies struggle with his capture. Mina digs up positive footage to help Kafka's case, while Hoshina and Kikoru push for fairness, though Hoshina's dad remains against him. Kafka endures brutal exams, longing to get back to his friends. The 3rd Division gets reassigned due to base damage and new kaiju threats, spread across multiple divisions as a precaution. Izumo thinks about calling his dad for help but learns Kaguragi had already reached out to his former military commander. In Kafka's cell, Isao shows up, rips off Kafka's bindings, and then goes straight to beating him, showing no faith in his humanity. Isao, hell-bent on finishing Kafka with special gauntlets, wrecks him, even making him lose an arm. Despite Kafka's desperate attempts to prove he's human, Isao lays into him, using his top-dog reputation to brutalize Kafka. As Kafka gets pummeled and is forced to transform to withstand Isao's assault, Isao uses kaiju-powered weapons to keep the pain coming. Kafka manages to block a punch by fully transforming, but his kaiju instincts kick in. Overcome by his monster side, Kafka loses control and charges at Isao, ready to go full beast mode and unable to stop himself. Ichika and Iaru are dead set on beefing up to protect their squad, fearing they'll regret it if Kafka makes a comeback. At the Defense Force HQ, Kafka goes toe-to-toe with Isao, barely keeping his kaiju instincts in check. Their epic brawl cracks the vault, showing off their insane power. Kafka, fighting his inner monsters, goes full-on desperate and stabs himself to prove he's still human, collapsing as Isao calls in medics. At a heated board meeting, Mina sticks up for Kafka, claiming he's still human despite his kaiju form and past heroics. The board, however, is fixated on his kaiju powers. Isao fights for Kafka's survival, saying he's a huge asset and has a solid track record with the 3rd Division, but the Council's not having it. Kafka dodges execution, but now has to prove he's worth keeping around as a Defense Force officer. As Kafka braces for fresh challenges, a new menace pops up. Kaiju number 9, gunning to grab back the Kaiju power humanity's holding. It's game on for Kafka and the Defense Force as they gear up for this next big showdown.